It again.
Yes.
Okay. So my answer is absolutely. In my view, choose the right cloud provider, and security is far better in the cloud than it can ever be for the average on-prem system for an SME. You get embassy-grade security, and I think that is something that you cannot ignore. But it's a question you're right to ask. It's a question that SMEs should be asking their providers. And the best providers will have the same kind of answer I've given.
What makes it more secure in
well, I mean, firstly, there's encryption. But, you know, when we say things are encrypted, it's a bit of an easy answer. You want a system to start with that prevents data breaches, prevents data leakage, prevents access to security to sensitive data, certainly and only by the right people. So let me qualify that. You want a system, to be quite honest, that stops people just selling your data. You need that kind of integrity. Now, as I say, the major cloud providers, talk to them. They'll give you the kind of answer I've given you. They'll point you to websites where they articulate their security policies and the kind of security you're going to get. And in a few seconds, you'll know exactly what you're getting, and you'll know you're dealing with the right kind of company, and you'll know your data's secure.
Cool. I see you want to jump in. You're just like aching to
I knew Jean-Luc would jump in.
But I think it's, I agree with what Steve said, but I think it's very important also to understand that security is not a technology question. It's really a process and governance question. So you really have to understand what type of threats you're exposed to, and then you know, act against these. And there's a lot of security already today in the service providers. But when we look at what has been happening in the industries, there's been a number of breaches with the iCloud. When we look at the kind of end-to-end perspective, also with what is happening with IoT now, devices coming in. What if the devices get compromised? Everybody probably remembers BMW being hacked, Jeep being hacked, Tesla being hacked. So there's a lot of threats out there that needs to be protected in a structured way. The other thing is, and that's maybe a different reflection, that is when we look at the governance and the processes part, we also have been looking very much at an old model of security, which is very much using the same principles as a fort, right? You know, you have different layers, but that doesn't work anymore because today we are working in an industry where everything is becoming an ecosystem play. So we need to move away from these fort type of setups to more of an airport type of setup with different types of mechanisms to actually protect different types of interactions. And that's very important to understand as well, even for SMEs.
Great. That's a very good point. What about your perspective, Haidar?
So I think it's a big question mark with with Steve specifically on when you do cloud, you're actually doing security at scale. The security standards, procedures, audits, reviews, certification that we have to go to, or any other vendor for that matter, the big vendors go to, are far more than what you do in your organization. So the question is a server stored in your next room more secure than in a fully automated data center with no access, or limited physical access, and that gets certified? That's the question. So from an SME perspective, I think definitely there's no questions about it. There's a lot of security benefit to go and migrate to cloud. And your two things, I would say, most of, or 50% of the attacks are really from internal. So a lot of the time it's the people on the internal that you need to watch out for, not necessarily mainly people on the external. So definitely this is something to look at, security, but I definitely think there's a lot more security would benefit the organization by moving to cloud.
That's a good point, yeah, because a lot of the times the information breaches happen from employees, or they're leaving, they take information with them, so...
50%.
Exactly, that's a good point. So, and in your perspective, Ryan, I know you harvest a lot of the data for clients, like the big multinationals of this world.
Yeah.
Have they ever voiced a concern to you about what you do with the data, or are you using that information from their consumers in maybe an intrusive way?
Yeah, I think you've got to remember, obviously, the industry that I'm in, we don't typically work with personally identifiable information, so it's more about marketing effects or cookie data from digital activity. Typically, questions we would get from clients is about where are you storing that data, what's your backup procedures. If we have two competing clients, they obviously want to be hived off separately and stored in separate areas. So they're typical questions we get answered, but we don't work with like customer level data. So for us, security, I think it's already been said by both the guys from Microsoft and IBM. You know, for me, you know, the cloud is as probably as secure as you're going to get. And if I'm an SME, there's no way internally they could build and have the R&D development that's going to secure them any better than the cloud's going to give you. So.
100%.
Sorry, one thing, Danny. Sorry, John-Luc. You know, we've all been in Dubai and we've seen the rain and the floods that happened in Dubai in the last 10 days. I mean, how many of us know of somebody who's had their water in their house or water in their office?
Yeah.
So, so if you don't have a backup strategy and store the data of your organization somewhere safe, not necessarily safe in your office, but could be safe in the cloud and with a cloud provider, that creates an extra level of availability and security for any organization out there.
100%. Weather conditions here, unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
You wanted to add something?
No, just one small point I wanted to add, and that's related to the insider threat. I mean, there's today also technologies that can protect against that. I mean, we work, for instance, with a keyless signature of all the data in the cloud. And that's when you look at some of the breaches like that we have seen in the cloud, these were, as said, they were insider threats. But if you have this type of technology in place where, for instance, you have traceability of all the accesses of the data, then for sure the probability of somebody trying to breach that data is going to substantially reduce.
Okay, interesting. So on the point of harvesting consumer data now, and that I think is more addressed to you, Ryan, is do you think consumers and users are concerned with their information being too readily available for use and to be sold and becoming more and more intrusive and used by people who are using this information to make their information more tailored, more contextual, and by extent, you know, making them more worried about that?
It's a massive question. My personal perspective, but obviously this is from me, I think from an advertising standpoint, a lot of the data that we're dealing with isn't personally identifiable. So we don't have people's bank details, as one example. You know, normally it's cookie related, so we're retargeting people based on cookies. You're now getting into the realms of, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like data management platforms where you're taking CRM data, you're then matching cookies to that CRM data and then retargeting, so creating segments off that and retargeting people online. I think there are isolated cases where people abuse that, but in most cases I don't think it's that intrusive. But maybe because I'm sitting on the inside, that's my perspective. That's what I would say.
So if we were to take the more optimistic point of view, with the Internet of Things and people's devices being you know, more connected to everything else, you know, information being more contextual and personalized, do you guys see this as a positive or a negative?
Absolutely positive. I think each of us, when we use the internet, when we use social media, we are creating a set of digital body behaviors, right? Digital body language, if you like. We are doing things, we are saying things, knowing full well that what we do and what we say can be analyzed. And I think we make a trade-off. In return for using really what's an amazing tool like Facebook an outstanding professional network like LinkedIn, we are happy to let them see a certain amount of our data, a certain amount of our information. As long as we have control, it can only be positive. And that's the big thing, as long as we, the individuals, so we make decisions. We make decisions to be on social media. We make decisions about what we reveal. And certainly you can make the decision to say, you know what, I'm going to absent myself from it. But the benefits are huge. It's a more human way of communicating. It connects with people that perhaps you wouldn't have otherwise connected with. And it can expose to you valuable insights. You know, I've had conversations with people on LinkedIn that have really given me professional insights that I wouldn't have otherwise got.
Very true. It allows us to connect to everyone a lot more, and to people all over the world, and that can help us benefit even for startups and for SMEs to be able to connect with different people from different groups and help them spread even faster, right?
I mean, as an SME, the information you can get from LinkedIn, from places like Medium, it's just phenomenal. And these are people like you. They are choosing to give information away because that information has a value, but they believe giving it has more value to them, to their network. And of course, they expect to get the same back. They expect you to provide insights on what your sphere of expertise is, for instance.
Yeah. So, Ryan, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to add maybe a little comment. As you said, I mean, for consumers, at the end, it's a trade-off between privacy and convenience. So as long as we get quality of life type of improvements, we're willing to trade in some of the privacy. But the other aspect, which I think is worthwhile mentioning for SMEs, is that especially for IoT, all the context data that you get from the devices will help to improve business processes. So it will help automate a lot of processes that will ultimately help in reducing costs and increase revenues for the SMEs. So that is a very important part because that context can be used even when the data is anonymized and create these improvements and gains.
Correct, and that would involve also algorithmic analysis where it becomes recursive and works on its own, which makes it much faster. So how would you advise SMEs to use Facebook or social media as essentially advertising platforms? Because essentially now they can become their own advertisers. They don't need to go to the Starcoms or, SMEs can become, their own use Facebook to become their own advertisers. So how would you advise SMEs to leverage Facebook as an advertising tool?
I wouldn't advise that at all. I think obviously we work with big multinationals, so obviously they come to us for scale. So we go to the likes of Google and we trade that scale across all those clients. I think specifically for SMEs, if you look at in the advertising space, it's really dominated by Google and Facebook, and that's continuing to progress as we go through the last couple of years. So if you have limited resources, limited budget, my focus from an SME would be I would focus my advertising on paid search and Facebook because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your money, I would say, from a digital perspective. A, it's better to track performance and pay back to you. B, you're going to get scale from it. And C, it's much more targeted than essentially kind of wasting your advertising investment.
100%. Any thoughts on that, Haidar?
So, two things. Specifically on marketing, what we've seen, and this is an experience from our partners that do a lot of marketing, and they're small and medium organizations. They found out that marketing is critical for their success, for reaching out new customers, and I know a lot of you are SMEs in the room with new ideas that they want to launch it. So having an advertising and a marketing approach is definitely critical. Social, online are evolving as the best platform, the most cost effective. Having an always on marketing strategy where you're not doing it campaign based or in 1 month, always on. Move away from necessarily the old classical traditional type of big launches and big advertising only, to more of social, online presence, case studies, references, videos or short videos of customers. These are evolving as very key trends in how small and medium businesses market. One last thought is about how to go and as a CEO or as an owner or as a startup of a company. I have a friend of mine who spends every Sunday, first half of the day, reviews the search results, what works, what doesn't work, and adjusts the advertising strategy on a weekly basis. This is not the job of a marketing intern only. This is the core of you as an owner of the organization, where how you're managing demand and spending that money to effectively get you new customers. And because social is becoming a very big story, I was chatting with the team backstage about a tool we have which is called social listening. It basically sniffs all the social media platforms, and then it tells you what is being said about your brand or your company on Twitter, on Facebook, on all the social platforms. It gives you a summary, a high-level summary. Stuff like this are catching on like fire because a lot of the businesses want that, and these are non-expensive tools to look at and explore. So that's what I would advise in this particular part.
That's very valuable and practical advice, and thank you for sharing that. So I'm getting told that we have to wrap it up, or do we have time for questions? One question. So if anyone has a question.
The typical way for a startup is to create their own web page through WordPress.
Yeah.
But there will be a moment when the company grows and the sales are growing that the technology has to be changed. This is what you're saying, that if a company wants to be successful, you need new technologies. You need to think about IoT. So what would you recommend for a startup to consult, to go to whom? Who will give the startup the recommendation to which platform to go? So there's many options. There's your company, Mr. Cox, there's many options. How is the way for a startup to know which technology to use?
Well, I think, we're all going to be biased, every single one of us. We're all going to say, come to us because we can tell you exactly what we want. But I'll try to be unbiased for a moment. I think if I have friends who are in the startups. My daughter has a startup. You're right. You start with WordPress because WordPress gives you the presence on the web that you need. But I think then your first decision becomes one about the back office, and it always comes back. And my experience, and I have a bias because I think every organization starts with a brand presence. You can even, you can add to WordPress